North Carolina, I don't think that they are capable of learning their lesson. So right on the heels of the HB2, the quote unquote bathroom bill fiasco, on the heels of them losing billions of dollars in commerce, they presented a bill today, filed by 3 Republican lawmakers, looking to completely ban gay marriage in North Carolina. And it is the Uphold Historical Marriage Act. That's the name of it. And it's the entire approach of it is to attack the Supreme Court decision that made gay marriage or marriage equality the law of the land, Obergefell versus Hodges. So if you pull up the image on your screen, you'll see a couple of key takeaways from this. And the section over on the right, starting in line 28, and it reads like this: the General Assembly of the state of North Carolina declares that Obergefell versus Hodges decision of the United States Supreme Court of 2015 is null and void in the state of North Carolina, and that the state of North Carolina shall henceforth uphold and enforce Section 6 of Article, I can't really see the line right there, 14, it's a little blurry for me, the North Carolina Constitution, the opinion of and objection of the United States Supreme Court notwithstanding. Section B says marriages, actually go back one for me. Marriages, whether created by common law, contracted, or performed outside of North Carolina between individuals of the same gender are not valid in North Carolina. So before we go to the next one, let's talk about, so this is the state of North Carolina trying to assert Article 10 over the Supreme Court. Article 10 of the Constitution, trying to say that this is a states' rights issue and that the Supreme Court overstepped their authority. And so because the Supreme Court overstepped their authority, the state of North Carolina is able to nullify the Supreme Court decision. It doesn't quite work like that, right? This bill is dead on arrival because they have a Democratic governor now. And so I'm quite sure that this is not going to be signed into law. But if you were to play this out and this was actually signed into law, you know, this would create not a constitutional crisis by any measure, but this would create a series of conflicts, of confrontations. If you think of, for instance, on the state level, there was in Kentucky, Kim Davis, I believe her name was, where she was the actual clerk trying to ignore the state law or to ignore Obergefell versus Hodges. And she was there as a roadblock to couples getting married. If this were to carry out, which it won't, but if it was to be implemented, this would create a situation where you would actually probably need the federal government to step in, almost like you did during the civil rights movement, where the National Guard had to actually enforce integration. But thankfully, again, this is not going to be signed into law, at least not while there's a Democratic governor in the state of North Carolina. Now, here's the last part about this bill, this proposed bill that is pretty disgusting. You can see it on your screen here. The highlighted section. This is what they said. Actually, I want to read the whole thing. Whereas the ruling of the United States Supreme Court not only exceeds the authority of the court relative to the state of North Carolina, I'm going to skip down, but also in the highlighted section, but also exceeds the court authority relative to decree of the Almighty God that a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Genesis 2:24. So this actually makes it quite easier if this actually became law for this to be overturned by a lower appellate court, right? This would be easily be dismissed because they're trying to codify their religious perspective into law over and above the Supreme Court's decision that's already standing. It almost feels like a moot point because this bill is not going to go anywhere. But this should be a constant reminder that for every inch that we get with regard to justice and equality, there are people laying in wait to undermine that progress, because the most important thing to them is not that you're free, but that they are free to impose their religious beliefs on your life. And this is the simplest way to break this down. It's amazing to me that people who in one breath would argue for the state and for the government to not be involved in their lives would in the next breath use the state and the federal government to impose their religious beliefs onto your life. They see no problem with the hypocrisy. They see no problem with the dissonance. In fact, they embrace the dissonance because they believe if there is any law in the land, it should be religious law. These are people who simultaneously decry Sharia law, but are trying to impose their own version of Christian Sharia law on your life. And they are there, even if they're not in power, even if they're not able to pass legislation, they are there waiting for the opportunity to undermine any freedoms that you get that go beyond their approved religious beliefs. And so long as they are sitting there waiting, we have to be constantly vigilant, constantly on our guard to recognize this attack from our political rivals. I won't describe them as an enemy just yet, but surely our political rivals who are trying to undermine any idea of progress. It makes absolutely no sense from a religious perspective. It makes no sense from a constitutional perspective. It makes no sense to anyone with common sense. But for people in the state of North Carolina, for these Republicans who are trying to ban gay marriage yet again, it doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense. All that matters is that it makes them feel religiously pious and makes them feel like they're doing the work of God. If you want to do the work of God, go to the church, go to the community. But if you want to do the work of the people, go to the government. Good night.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon! If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.